Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. You know, given that the topic is what Pakistan can learn from Sri Lanka in our not very happy situations, I'm reminded of the opening lines of Anna Karenina, where they talk about how unhappy families are unhappy in their own different ways. So in that respect, I leave it up to you to decide as to what you can learn from Sri Lanka's misfortune at the present moment. First and foremost, let me say, I entirely endorse what the keynote speaker said with regard to food insecurity, and certainly those are characteristics that can be seen in the Sri Lankan situation as well. But there are some things that are different. Well, very basically, at the present moment, food inflation is something like 95%. We have people who do not have the ability to have 3 square meals a day. We have nutrition levels which are plummeting to the worst in the world. We also have situations in which children are fainting in schools because they do not have enough to eat, and teachers are therefore trying to organize community kitchens in the school to be able to make sure that the children have 3 square meals a day. In addition to that, of course, we have the problems with regard to basic essential medical supplies for people who get ill. Now, this is a situation that Sri Lanka has never faced ever before. We always said that in Sri Lanka we would never starve, but I think we have to look again at that situation, because there are parts of the country where this is happening. Now, we went to a 30-year civil war, almost 30 years, and we had bad situations like this. But now it is the entire country that is facing this. And quite frankly, at the present moment, the popular struggle, the demonstrations in the street have subsided. But if the situation with regard to the shortages of food, shortages of medicine, if that is to continue, it is entirely possible that we could get an explosion of discontent from outside of Colombo. And it would be a spontaneous explosion of discontent, not on the basis of constitutional reform or return the money you have stolen or go home, never get involved in politics, but on the basic question of we can't live because we can't feed our children, you know. Now, when you look at how we came to this situation, one must say that the Rajapaksas, the family that has dominated Sri Lankan politics in the last 20 years, they didn't create the situation. They just made it one hell of a lot worse. And in particular, there is one decision that was taken by them that compounded the question of food insecurity, and that was the president decided that overnight we would move from chemical fertilizer in agriculture to organic fertilizer. Overnight he decided to do that. Now, we all know that the decision in itself is not a bad one, but to try to do it overnight is disastrous. That has had a severe impact on the food supply chain. We have 2 major crops of paddy, because rice is our staple food. We have the Maha crop and the Yala crop, and the Maha crop has been severely affected by this whole decision to move to organic fertilizer. The soil in the country is not used to it. We've been for years and years and years using chemical fertilizer. We have to do it maybe over 5 to 10 years or whatever, but the decision to do it overnight really devastated the food supply chain. So in that respect, there have been immediate man-made decisions that have compounded or exacerbated the level of crisis that we've had to face. The other point also is this, is that in the meantime, we have been getting humanitarian assistance India has been particularly good in giving us something like $4 billion in this respect. So we have been trying to bridge the gap somewhat, but I think we need a proper plan. And the problem, I think, if I may if I may err on the point of exaggeration perhaps, but nevertheless I think there's a truth in this, is that we as South Asians are not particularly good at planning. We are not particularly good at planning, and once we make the plans, to stick to those plans. In addition, in Sri Lanka, we have a system of government which is national government, provincial government, and then we have local government. Now, the two lower levels of government can obviously assist in terms of the distribution of food, but they do not exist. It is now entirely a central government number. It's entirely a central government function, and as a consequence, we may not be getting to those who really do need it. For years, Sri Lanka has had what we call a social welfare scheme. It used to be called Janasavya, now it's called Samurdhi. But we know that the lowest 25 percentile of the people who are eligible to get that benefit do not get it. And the reason for it is that there is political interference, and the benefits go to political supporters. That has got to change, and that's why I endorse entirely what the previous speaker was saying, is that it is not just a question of the availability of the food or the availability of the resources. It is how they are handled in terms of the management of it, the distribution of it. Now the IMF, in our conversations with the IMF has agreed, and it's not the IMF of yore, that was that terrible ogre who was wanting to privatize everything and all of that. The IMF has agreed that there should be cash transfers to the poor, that we should, as part of that package, have a proper welfare net, and that should be closely monitored to ensure that those who are in need of it do actually get it. So in terms of the food insecurity question, Sri Lanka, there's one other point that I need to make with regard to it. In terms of the Rajapaksas' complicity in making this worse, was that they stubbornly refused to go to the IMF, and as a consequence, they used our foreign exchange reserve to pay back international creditors. As a consequence, we didn't have a single dollar to import basic essentials. We didn't have a single dollar to import basic essentials, including, most importantly, food as well. So the situation in Sri Lanka at the present moment is one in which years of mismanagement, of drawbacks, and all of that have now been brought to a climax or a crescendo. And we really need to, as I said earlier today, we really need to redefine the social contract. We really need to ensure that the rights of people are heard, that they are not marginalized, that they're all included in this social contract. And then I think we will be able to get out of a situation in which we now have a country that had some of the best social development indices, now being one of the countries in which malnutrition is one of the highest. Thank you.